Okay. So we're reading Sri Nisargadatta's book, I Am That. It's treatise on Advaita Vedanta. We're on chapter 59. Desire and fear are self-centered states. Yeah, desire and fear, self-centered states. Interestingly enough, those are the first two attributes of egoism, desire and fear. The desire caused, well, they're both caused by the same thing. The ego makes us small, isolates us, cuts us off from the whole. And so desire is the things that you now need because they're separate from you, they're cut off from you. And fear is self centered because you don't know how big the other is. And so fear is born out of the idea of other. So fear and desire are two self centered states, two indications that you are on an egoistic trajectory, right? If you feel fear or desire, it's a good time to kind of sit down and do a few deep breaths and remember who you are. To gather your strength, gather your courage. All right, so desire and fear, self-centered states. Now our questioner's got quite a long question here. He says, I would like to go again into the question of pleasure and pain, desire and fear. I understand fear, which is memory and anticipation of pain. It is essential for the preservation of the organism and its living pattern. Needs, when felt, are painful and their anticipation is full of fear. We are rightly afraid of not being able to meet our basic needs. The relief experienced when a need is met or an anxiety allayed is entirely due to the ending of pain. We may give it a positive name like pleasure or joy or happiness, but essentially it's relief from pain. It is this fear of pain that holds together our social, economic, and political institutions. That's cheery. What puzzles me is that we derive pleasure from things and states of mind which have nothing to do with survival. On the contrary, our pleasures are usually destructive. They damage or destroy the object, the instrument, and also the subject of pleasure. Otherwise, pleasure and pursuit of pleasure would be no problem. This brings me to the core of my question. Why is pleasure destructive? Why, in spite of its destructiveness, is it wanted? I may add, I do not have in mind the pleasure-pain pattern by which nature compels us to go her way. I think of the man-made pleasures, both sensory and subtle, ranging from the grossest, like overeating, to the most refined. Addiction to pleasure, or at whatever cost, is so universal, and there must be something significant at the root of it. Of course, not every activity of man must be utilitarian, designed to meet a need. Play, for example, is natural, and man is the most playful animal in existence. Play fulfills the need for self-discovery and self-development, but even on his play, man becomes destructive of nature, others, and himself. Maharaj, in short, you do not object to pleasure, but only to its price in pain and sorrow. Questioner, well, if reality itself is bliss, then pleasure in some way must be related to it. Maharaj, let us proceed by verbal logic. The bliss of reality does not exclude suffering. Besides, you know only pleasure, but not the bliss of pure being. So let us examine pleasure at its own level. If you look at yourself in your moments of pleasure or pain, you will invariably find that it is not the thing in itself that is pleasant or painful, but the situation of which it is a part. Pleasure lies in the relationship between the enjoyer and the enjoyed, and the essence of its acceptance. Whatever may be the situation, if it is acceptable, it is pleasant. If it is not acceptable, it is painful. What makes it acceptable is not important. The cause may be physical or psychological or untraceable. Acceptance is the decisive factor. Conversely, suffering is due to non-acceptance. Questioner, well, pain is not acceptable. Maharaj, why not? Did you ever try? Do try, and you will find in pain a joy which pleasure cannot yield. For the simple reason that the acceptance of pain takes you much deeper than pleasure does. The personal self, by its very nature, is constantly pursuing pleasure and avoiding pain. The ending of this pattern is the ending of the self, the little s self. The ending of the little self is with its desires and fears enables you to return to your real nature, the source of all happiness and peace. The perennial desire for pleasure is the reflection of the timeless harmony within. It is an observable fact that one becomes self-conscious only when caught in the conflict between pleasure and pain, which demands choice and decision. It is this clash between the desire and fear that causes anger, which is the great destroyer of sanity in life. When pain is accepted for what it is, a lesson and a warning, and deeply looked into and heeded, the separation between pain and pleasure breaks down. Both become experience, painful when resisted and joyful when accepted. All right. Anybody want to repeat that back to me in a nice summary?
Maharaj, I'd like you to repeat that.
Well, it's interesting because pleasure and pain are sourced in the same. They're just sensations, right? So they're really the same. Vivekananda says they're really the same thing. What makes one pain and what makes one pleasure, like what our Nisargadatta here is saying, is whether you accept it or not. You know, whether you reject it, resist it, push against it or not. And this interesting thing that he says here that that accepting pain takes you deeper than accepting pleasure, which is very interesting because you have to go inside to escape pain. You have to go outside to search for pleasure, right? Which is an interesting distinction. But yeah, well, that's a fascinating thing. I knew a friend who used to have a practice of a little bit of pain because he said that it could drive him places in his mind that he couldn't get to otherwise. So there's something to this idea. Interesting. You know, really, as I see it, desire can really be summed up as our attempt to recreate our infinite self, the capital S self, to recreate that experience of being in the finite world as a finite being. That's what desire is at its root. You know, it's us wanting to express our capital S self in the finite with all of its experiences. And so that can't be done. And so that's why we're always hungry, because we're always trying to find that infinite love, that infinite security, that infinite peace, that infinite oneness. We're trying to constantly express that here, right? So anything that looks like immortality is desirable. Anything that looks like unity is desirable. Anything that looks like bliss is desirable, right? And anything that counters our divine nature, those would be the things, the sufferings and the pains, those things that we avoid. So just this notion of being a body mind and not being spirit is our biggest trouble. Really everything hinges there, right? And the glue that holds us in that spot of wrong thinking, Ramakrishna says, is the lust and greed. right? Which is actually the cause of both of these two things. Pleasure would be the lust, right? And greed would be the mental. So you got body, mind, mental there in that. Yeah, when I had that little episode breaking my leg, I did a little bit of work with this kind of stuff because I had never felt such a such a pain in my life as the first few days of that broken leg. And I remember discovering that it was a lot easier to breathe into the pain than it was to try and ignore it or to try and resist it. I remember doing that experiment, like stop pushing against the pain, invite it in and accept it. So I breathed into it and I kind of let it flow through me rather than being blocked. And I found that distributed the in a way distributed the pain over a greater area. When you block it, it's at the point of resistance that you feel the most pain. When you breathe into it, it kind of distributes a bit. It's still painful, but it's not pointed as pointed. So there's something to this idea because pain and pleasure both belong to mind, of course. We know that. And Trigunatita, that class we're reading here in the Santa Barbara Temple on Wednesdays, yesterday he was talking about this, this ability that Trigunatita had to block, to withdraw the mind. That he had a carbuncle removed from his back one time with no anesthesia. He had all that dental work done. So this idea, suffering is optional. Pain is there, but you can withdraw that, right? It's like right now, if I say your left elbow, suddenly you'll be aware of sensations coming from your left elbow. Those sensations didn't just turn on. No, what happened is you placed your mind on your elbow and became aware of those sensations. And so right now you've got sensations coming in from 10 million billion nerves all over your body, but you're selective, right? And so what this thing with Trigunatita is teaching us is that can be learned so that you can have the body hurt in a place and you can withdraw your mind from it, just like your mind is withdrawn from your left elbow when you're not thinking about it. But when I say the words left elbow, suddenly you're aware of exactly how it feels. And so like that, it's making that a consciously controlled effort rather than just a subconsciously controlled effort, right? It's bringing these things into awareness like that. So this is our states of pleasure and pain.
So Maharaj, sorry,
Uh-huh.
he's also saying that, is he saying that suffering, but even when it's mental, that when it's accepted, then then there is no pain in it, that there is no suffering left, right? Is that a part of it?
Yeah,
Is
yes, that suffering is resistance. Yeah.
right, right, right.
It's not that
Okay.
there won't be pain. There'll still be pain, but there won't be the suffering, the mental aspect of
Yeah.
pain.
Right. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
got it. Yeah.
So our questioner says, well, do you advise shunning pleasure and pursuing pain? Maharaj, no. Pursuing pleasure and shunning, nor pers no, nor pursuing pleasure and shunning pain. So he doesn't want you pursuing or shunning either one. Accept both as they come. Enjoy both while they last. Let them go as they must. How can I possibly enjoy pain? Right? Physical pain calls for action. Well, of course, and so does mental. The bliss is in the awareness of it, not in shrinking or in any way turning away from it. All happiness comes from awareness. The more we are conscious, the deeper the joy. Acceptance of pain, non resistance, courage, and endurance These open deep and perennial sources of real happiness, of true bliss. Wow, that's a nice list right there. So if you want to open deep and perennial sources of real happiness and true bliss, this acceptance of pain, non-resistance, courage, and endurance. Wow, that's a big secret right there, you guys. That's a big secret.
And how to practice it.
Well, that non-resistance means don't resist something. Don't try and get rid of it. Just invite it in. It's a practice. There's no doubt. I don't think you can just all of a sudden right now say, "Bring on that headache." No problem. Bring it on. Come on in. Have a seat. Have a cup of tea. But I think in time we do learn to live, or can learn to live with these things. I'm reminded of that woman that I met in Michigan. It's been a while since I've told that story. But she came to a class and asked if she could spend some time, and so we met at this cafe. And I went in there, I was all in my mindset. I was there to answer her questions or to help her in any way. I was the giver and she was the receiver in my mind. So we sat down and she started telling me her story and that she had lost her husband 2 years or 1 year before uh, this, and they were a young couple. She was in her 20s, and she lost her husband in a car accident and was horribly broken over that. And then within the next year, the year following losing her husband, she herself was in a car accident and broke her neck. And she had been a yoga teacher. And so now
Oh,
she could no longer teach yoga because of her broken neck injury. And she was in permanent pain. They told her she was going to be in pain for the rest of her life, and there was nothing they could do about it. So for the first 6 months, she said that she lived on pain medications, just constantly popping pain medications. And after that 6 months, she said to herself, I can't live like that. I can't live drugged out all the time like that. So she told me, she says, at that point, I decided that I would turn my pain from my neck into my mantra, that it would become the thing that would remind me of God. And she said, after I started practicing that, she said, you could never understand how brilliantly that worked. How brilliantly that worked, that I associated that pain with my divine, you know. And so she was sitting there, and I was sitting there listening to her tell me this, and I was so humbled. I was like, here I thought I was coming here to teach her something, and here I came and learned something profound, something deep from this woman. That when she went through so much suffering, because there's another part of her story too. She couldn't do her yoga anymore, and that was her service and her spiritual practice. So what she started doing was on Fridays, she would open her house, and during the rest of the week, she had these invitations with time slots on them, and she would hand those out to homeless people. And those homeless people could come to her house at that time slot that she gave them, and she would make them some food, let them use her shower, let them use her washer and dryer if she wanted on Fridays. So she did this every Friday as her means of service. Then was just opening up her house to people that she had invited to come and use her facilities there. So quite a person, quite a beautiful person to see how when Swami Prabhupada says karma isn't what happens to you. Karma is what you're able to do with what happens to you. So if you're a person with good karma and something bad happens, you're able to turn it into gold somehow. Whereas somebody with bad karma, something challenging happens to them and they're defeated by it, right? They go into a spin from it. So Swami Prabhupada said that's the true meaning of karma. That karma is what you're able to do with what happens to you. And the what happens to you isn't good or bad until you decide what you're going to do with it. Remember, so he always gave me that example of the two men who lost their ability to walk, and one grows bitter and angry about it, right? And the other one joins the Special Olympics and wins a gold medal and goes around inspiring kids, with disabilities to rise above them. So which one had good karma, which one had bad karma? They both lost the ability to walk. But one person was able to create something beautiful out of it, and the other person was defeated by it. So this is the way karma works. And that's the right way to think about karma, according to Prabhupada. He said, because karma was meant to empower us, not to explain our defeat. All right? Karma was designed to empower us. You are in charge of your destiny by what you do in this moment. You're in charge. It was not given to us to explain our current condition. That's not what it's for. It's simply there to let you know that you're in charge of your destiny. You have all the power. So we hold on to that. So acceptance of pain, non-resistance, courage, and endurance, these open deep and perennial sources of real happiness, true bliss. So deep sources, lasting sources, perennial, which means returning opportunities, perennial sources of real happiness and true bliss. Well, why should pain be more effective than pleasure? He asks. Maharaj. Pleasure is readily accepted, right? You start feeling good, you're like, awesome. while all the powers of the self reject pain. As the acceptance of pain is the denial of the self, the lower self, and the lower self stands in the way of true happiness, the wholehearted acceptance of pain releases the springs of happiness. Questioner, does the acceptance of suffering act the same way? Maharaj, the fact of pain is easily brought within the focus of awareness. With suffering, it is not that simple. To focus suffering is not enough, for mental life as we know it is one continuous stream of suffering. To reach the deeper layers of suffering, you must go to its roots and uncover their vast underground network, where fear and desire are closely interwoven, and the currents of life's energy oppose, obstruct, and destroy each other. Right, so he's talking about, really what he's describing here is ego life. This is his explanation of how ego life happens, right? That why he says that thought, where did he say that? To focus suffering is not enough, for mental life as we know it is one continuous stream of suffering. Now, how many of you have thought of have thought that to be the case, that your mental life is one continuous flow of suffering, right? Well, why is that, right? Why would that be? Well, it's because our mental life is churned when we identify with body-mind, right? The self has no desire. The true self has no desires, no particularities, no point of reference, and is ever free and immortal, right? That's its nature. When that constricts or gets tangled, gets caught in the trap of body-mind, those limitations are the suffering. And remember, we talked about all of our desires is the desire of the soul to express its true nature, right? But when it's identified with body-mind, the only means that it has of that expression are finite, right? So that manifests desires. That's what brings our desire about in this world. And so we get caught up in that. And our mind is noisy. The mind moves only when it's out of balance, right? Only when there's a sense of lack or a sense of need does thought happen. And so since our minds are constantly churning, right, we're always out of balance. And we're not aware of it because we don't go inside to the subtle realms and sit silently. We haven't done enough practice of that. Right? When we go inside and we begin to accept ourselves and we begin to know our divine nature by being exposed to it through our prayer and through our mantra. As we sit there and become familiar with those things, then we become familiar with the fact that our mind is constantly churning, right? And the awareness of that begins to slow it down. So little by little, we gather ourselves back into our center. And by doing that, we experience ourselves as spirit, which is what gives us all power, right? Knowing ourselves to be as spirit is what gives us full control of body and mind, right? Or you can go the other way. Getting full control of body and mind shows you spirit, reveals your sense of spirit to you, who you are. Right? So we can't really focus our suffering because there's not a point. The mind is a flow, and it's a flow of suffering, right? And so he says to reach the deeper layers of suffering, you have to go to its roots, where fear and desire are closely interwoven, and the currents of life's energy oppose, obstruct, and destroy each other, right? Because that oppose, obstruction, destroying, that's, creation, maintenance, destruction. That's the temporary nature of the changing world. Everything is in constant flow and opposition and harmony, all simultaneous. It's a cacophony of perfection when seen from a particular perspective. You can't see the perspective, you can't see the perfection until you get the universal knowledge, the universal understanding of it, where everything is working together perfectly for the whole, right? So the questioner says, well, how can I set right a tangle which is entirely below the level of my consciousness? Maharaj, by being with yourself, right? That's what we just finished mentioning. We don't have these subtle tools because we don't spend the time in our inner world observing what's going on in our inner world. And so this is what he's saying here, by being with yourself, right? Go and spend your time alone. Go within and begin just looking through your inner closet where you hang up all of your old memories, where you keep your stories of your childhood, where you keep your likes and your dislikes, and how they all get excited. Somebody touches you on the cheek and suddenly you're remembering your grandmother when you were a boy kissing your cheek and giving you a cookie, and you're totally in that space just because of somebody touching your cheek in the same way your grandma once kissed you there. Right? You begin to learn and see how the body and mind work, and you begin to realize that all these desires that you thought that were yours were just basically reactions to some sensual touch or some smell or some sound or some sight, that was going on. And you begin to realize, wow, this big personal story that I thought was so personal and so me, we come to find out that actually it had nothing to do with me. It was just the body and the mind following prompts, which is exactly what Vivekananda says. You know, that's why we don't have free will, right? Free will is to be without desire. If you've got desires, you're no longer free because you're following the prompts of something else for your happiness, for your contentment. And so, yes, so how do I set right this tangle, right, of things that I'm not even conscious of? Well, by being with yourself, the I am, by watching yourself in your daily life with alert interest. That's a very important word right there, with alert interest, right? That is the goal of the witness state, right? Where we are alert and witnessing the moment with alertness at every moment, because we're becoming aware of everything that's happening within and how that's forming our experience of being, right? And as we back out of it, let go of it, the neti of it, right? And come into the peace of the self, that increases our awareness. We become, and that's self-taught, you see, by being aware, by being with ourselves inside and seeing how all of these things work, that neti begins to happen of its own accord, because you realize that it's an impersonal world in there. It's not personal like you thought, that these are all my sweet little fuzzy, nothings in here. But it wasn't that. They were just all basically places you were driven by the pressures of your mind as prompts from the senses reminded it of some scars and past, right? So by being with yourself, being the I am, watching yourself with an alert interest, with the intention to understand rather than to judge, right? Okay, very important. You don't go inside and begin judging. You go inside and begin conversation, begin understanding. You feel a darkness. You don't push it away. You don't resist it. You invite it in. You ask it, why are you there? Why do I feel so dark? And accept it. Accept the darkness. Don't try and get rid of it. Just try and hear it. Try and understand what it's communicating. Be there, And one of the things I found very effective for me when I was dealing with that depression was to go into that dark space, that depressive space, and just breathe there and imagine light and just declare to myself, love will win here. So any place that I would find dark or troublesome inside, I go into that place, breathe into it, accept it, befriend it, offer it tea, as Hafiz says, offer it tea at your mental table, sit down and hear, be with it. And then just declare your intention. Love will win here, right? It doesn't have to do it on the spot. It doesn't have to dissipate immediately. But you go down in friendliness with mind, accept your experience, right? Open up to it, hear it, try and befriend it, and then make your declaration, love will win here. And then go on about your business. And do that every so often. Whenever that darkness or that place seems to arise, go back into it, accept it, sit there, realize you can exist there with no troubles, no need to resist it. It's part of life. Hear what it has to say, and then make your declaration. Love will win here, and then move on, right? And in time, at least in that circumstance for me, it became true. The cloud dissipated over time, and that darkness doesn't come back anymore, right? It's been integrated into the self. Light has been lit there and allowed to permeate that space. So this is a very important little practice here that he's giving us. So go inside with the intention to understand rather than to judge, in full acceptance of whatever may emerge, right? So no resistance. There's no out of bounds places. There's no out of bounds thoughts. No matter what thoughts come, don't judge them. That's not your intention. Understand them, see them, accept them, right? About yourself. They will express themselves. When you create a safe environment within yourself, they will express, and their knots will come untied, right? So sit in full acceptance of whatever may emerge. Because it is there, you encourage the deep to come to the surface and to enrich your life and consciousness with its captive energies. This is the great work of awareness. It removes obstacles and releases energies by understanding the nature of life and mind. Intelligence is the door to freedom, and alert attention is the mother of intelligence. There it is. That's a beautiful paragraph right there, actually. I'm going to highlight it. That's really something. That'll preach, like they say.
Swamiji,
Yes.
could you
Come on.
please read that again?
Yes, I absolutely will. Thank you very much for asking for that. All right. So the question is, how can I set right a tangle, right, which is our noisy mind and our constant inner restlessness? How can I set right a tangle which is entirely below the level of my consciousness, right? We're not even aware of what all the problems are in there. Maharaj, by being with yourself, right? By spending some time just with yourself, with the I am. So being aware of your awareness, just sitting quietly and feeling life, feeling the existence, feeling the bliss of being, feel the wisdom, right? Unfolding in the moment. So by being with yourself, the I am, by watching yourself in daily life with alert interest, with the intention to understand your inner world rather than to judge, in full acceptance of whatever may emerge, because it is there. You encourage the deep to come to the surface and to enrich your life and consciousness with its captive energies. This is the great work of awareness. It removes obstacles and it releases energies by understanding the nature of life and mind. Intelligence is the door to freedom, and alert attention is the mother of intelligence. Right? So that intelligence that he's talking about real knowledge here, jnana. And he says that this jnana is the door to freedom. This understanding your inner world is the door to freedom, right? And alert attention is how you develop this, inner awareness, this inner wisdom, inner intelligence.
So it's more like living as a witness.
Definitely living as a witness, but living as a witness with no judgment of what you're witnessing. So no analysis of what's being witnessed, a pure acceptance, right, of what you're witnessing, no resistance to it. And you're in the process, in good karma, you are in the process of taking whatever is happening and creating gold out of it, creating an offering to the divine in the moment from it, whatever it is that you've got, right? If you're sitting in the room doing nothing, then sing the names of God and offer it in the moment. Chant God's name and offer it. If you want to go outside and, do anything. There's so many things. Take $5. If you live in a city, take $5 and go for a walk looking for someone to give it to and pray to Mother, so that when you're walking, you're developing an eye of service. You're developing an awareness of need. So you walk with $5, asking Mother to give it to the right person. So you go and you give that away. Or, go out and any number of things. Go out and buy a card for a friend and just send a random appreciation card to a friend. All these things that you can go outside and do as a means of moving yourself forward, of
Yes,
keeping yourself
again,
aware.
I have the same question.
Uh-huh.
What about when you're in the midst of people all around you and you want to stay in the moment? How do I do that?
You're aware.
Well, there's many ways. One way would be to pause for a moment and hear yourself breathe 3 or 4 breaths. Bring yourself into yourself, and then do an exercise. Look around the table. Try and make eye contact with each person and smile at Thakur. Just to warm up your awareness, warm up your rules here. Okay, I'm sitting at a table full of Thakurs, right? And then start listening to everything that they're saying, not as if it's coming from them, but as if it's coming from the context of Thakur, right? And you'll find spiritual lessons start to open up. You'll start to hear some great teachings, right? And then the warmth of your connection with them, because you're connecting with your beloved, they will feel that warmth and benefit from that warmth, and that will create trust between you. That will create a feeling of openness around the table. So it's like that. But that's just one way to do it. There's many ways of doing it, and it's up to you to, one, become aware of your forgetfulness, and in that awareness of your forgetfulness, come up with a solution. Do something. At the end of your day today, this is one of those things that makes me a hypocrite, because I don't often do this. But at the end of your day, you should, like Ramakrishna, at the end of every day, he sort of analyzed his day. He's like, another day has passed and I haven't realized God. What did I do wrong? What did I not do properly? And he would analyze it and he would try and live differently the next day. Right? For us, we don't realize God and we just get up and do the same thing again. And after we just keep doing the same thing again and again and again, after years, we're like, well, how come I'm not getting anywhere? How come I'm not changing? Well, it's because you keep trying to do the same things over and over, even though they don't work from day to day, right? So it's bringing that dynamic attitude, that alert awareness into our daily life that will develop these things. Because the beauty of this is God is meant to be seen, meant to be enjoyed, meant to be experienced. That is what we're doing all of this nonsense for, right? Is to have that constant experience of our divine nature in the presence. And that can be enjoyed. That is yours. And it doesn't have to be learned from a book. It's not helpful to get it from a book. Belief is not the answer to life. Experience is the final word, right? And so as you sit and work on these things, uh, these things unfold. You'll come to the knowledge of the scriptures, not just by memorizing things from the scriptures, but by doing the practices so that you're looking at them and you can describe them firsthand to someone asking you a question. You don't have to go and quote a page from the scripture. You open your inner eye and you're like, oh, wow, there it is. And you just start talking about it, right? So that's the way to real knowledge. That's what Ramakrishna was talking about to M, about real knowledge comes from this alert attention on a momentary basis during your day. That's what our practice is for getting that, bringing us to that 0 point and holding us there so we can sit and watch and learn and see how this inner world works. And once we can see how it works, we can avoid the pitfalls. We can see the source of our desires and discern, oh, that didn't have anything to do with me. That had to do with the smell I had just a moment ago. It's not that I wanted pizza. It's that I smelled pizza and that triggered a memory of a pleasure that came from pizza. And then that makes me want that, right? And you're like, well, gosh, I didn't initiate that. I didn't, before that, I didn't want pizza. So pizza is not my will. Pizza's some other will somewhere that got provoked, right? And so you begin to see that. And we use that in our discernment. And that's how we start letting go of these things. And when we start letting go of these things, then that attack doesn't work so well. So the mind stops using it, right? It stops constantly. If it knows you're going to say no, it will stop tempting you. The mind only continues to tempt you when it knows that you're not really saying no, right? When you're saying, oh, let me fight a little bit longer and then I'll have a cookie, right? You know this, the mind knows this, but you'll play the game nonetheless, right? Yeah. This is how it all works. Oh my goodness. Yeah, 8:41. 8 to 9. Okay, we're doing good. Never mind. I don't know why suddenly that's become a big problem. The 4:30 classes and the 8 a.m. classes. I look down and I panic. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm 10 minutes over. I'm like, no, 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 that's an afternoon class.
I don't know
All
how you
right.
do it.
What's that?
See, I don't know how you do it, manage all that stuff.
In a state of constant confusion, mostly. But so after this brilliant paragraph, our questioner says, well, one more question. Why does pleasure end in pain? Maharaj, everything has a beginning and an end, and so does pleasure. Don't anticipate and don't regret, and there will be no pain. It is memory and imagination that cause suffering. God, if we can get a hand on today's teachings, perfection's on our doorstep, man. These are some great, great pieces. Everything has a beginning and an end, and so does pleasure. Don't anticipate and don't regret, right? Don't anticipate. That's karma yoga. Don't do anything for results. Be in the moment as it is. Don't regret. Don't let the past in, right? So don't anticipate. Don't let the future in. Don't regret. Don't let the past in. Be present in the moment, and there will be no pain. It is memory and imagination that cause suffering. Because it's memory and imagination that is our whole world when we are ego-selfed. The moment actually gives us very little because we're not living in the moment, right? We're anticipating our desires and working on them. We're avoiding our pains by not thinking about them. And we're using the moment mostly to give us some distraction and to give us our desire, right? We're not using the moment itself as bliss itself. We're not taking the moment as the solution. We're taking a plan as the solution, and that requires our future and our engagement and our anticipations. And we're being moved by regrets, right? Being moved by things that seem to lack in our moment. So he says this is why our pleasures end in pain. This is why life is not satisfying to us. We're always anticipating and we're always regretting, going back and forth. Memory and imagination causing us to suffer the whole time. He says, of course, pain after pleasure may be due to the misuse of the body or the mind. The body knows its measure, but the mind does not. Its appetites are numberless and limitless. See, and this is the problem. If you're answering a mental desire, through the physical desire, the body's going to have a limit of how much it can express that pleasure or that pain or that desire. But the mind isn't. The mind isn't going to be happy when you're finished with one piece of cake. The mind's going to be, let's do 2 pieces of cake, right? And it's just like that. And even if after you had 2, you might be satisfied for a moment. So you'll wait an hour and then you're like, let's do 3 pieces of cake, right? Because the mind doesn't quit. It's the body that's the limit as far as desires go, oddly enough. So, of course, pain or after pleasure may be due to the misuse of the body or the mind. The body knows its measure, but the mind does not. The mind's appetites are numberless and limitless. Watch your mind with great diligence, for there lies your bondage, and also the key to your freedom, right? So watch your mind. That's this alert awareness. Watch yourself. Don't let things happen. Don't be interested in what you're thinking. Be interested in who's thinking and who's watching the thinking, right? So the questioner says, well, my question's not yet fully answered. Why are man's pleasures destructive? Why does he find so much pleasure in destruction? Life's concern lies in protection, perpetuation, and expansion itself. In this, it is guided by pain and pleasure. At what point do they become destructive? Maharaj, when the mind takes over, remembers and anticipates, it exaggerates, it distorts, it overlooks. The past is projected into future, and the future betrays the expectations. The organs of sensation and action are stimulated beyond capacity, and they inevitably break down. The objects of pleasure cannot yield what is expected of them and get worn out or destroyed by misuse. It results in the excess of pain where pleasure was looked for. Well, questioner, we destroy not only ourselves, but others too. Maharaj, well, naturally, selfishness is always destructive. Desire and fear, both are self-centered states. Between desire and fear, anger arises. With anger comes hatred. With hatred, passion for destruction. War is hatred in action, organized and equipped with all the instruments of death. Right, so he's really talking about the 2 ends of the gradient that we get to choose, right? We can live as material, body, mind, right, over here, and we can live as spirit, Atman, self, over here, right? We can be defined by body and mind and their constant limitations, their constant hungers and needs, or we can be identified with the silence of contentment, with inner peace, with inner quiet, right? And so we get these 2 choices. At this end, you get like a Mussolini or a Hitler, right? A fascist of some kind, living according to body mind and making their judgments and their values line up with their body mind ideal. So you run into those Hitlers and whatnots at this end, where very few people are benefited and a huge number of people are harmed by that type of ideal. And then you have the ideal of who we really are, living according to spirit, universal, living according to Satchitananda, And at this end, you'll have your Jesuses, your Ramakrishnas, your Buddhas, your Holy Mothers, right? And all of us are all riding along somewhere in between those two extremes, trying to slowly weed out who we are, because that's the only thing we're confused about, is who we are. And when we come to know our nature to be Satchitananda, really understand that by this alert awareness inside, watching, learning, being taught by the way things work in the body and mind. And through that knowledge, discern and let go of the things that have nothing to do with you. And in time, you find joy. In time, you discover your bliss of being. It needs no other cause than a moment's breath and a return back to the bliss of being, right? This moment is enough for ecstasy, for your joys. It's not this moment that is unhappy. It is the condition of mind that is unhappy, the condition of body that is unhappy, right? And the first step is don't resist it. Say, okay, I'm unhappy. I can sit here and be unhappy, right? And you kind of let unhappiness unpack itself. Be kind, be gentle, hear it, open to it, accept it, and ask it what it needs. And if that can be given, give it. If it can't, then get up with the awareness and keep going. But don't be beaten by it. Don't sit there resisting it. Accept it, open, and transcend. I don't know if that's a good t-shirt or not, but accept, open, and transcend. Right? Is there a way to end these horrors, Maharaj? Well, when more people come to know their real nature, their influence, however subtle, will prevail, and the world's emotional atmosphere will sweeten up. Right? So as more people come to know their real nature, the nature is Satchitananda. That is what brings joy. Right? Their influence, because that awareness of Satchitananda is itself a healing cause. All you have to do is become aware of it in yourself, and immediately healing begins, right? The harmony starts developing. Every time you remember your true nature, that influence will increase, however subtle, and will prevail, and the world's emotional atmosphere will sweeten up. People follow their leaders, and when among the leaders appear some great in heart and mind, and absolutely free from self-seeking, their impact will be enough to make the crudities and crimes of the present age impossible. A new golden age may come and last for a time and succumb to its own perfection, for ebb begins the tide when the tide is at its highest. Right? So that's the thing. That's why we have these classes. That's why we talk about these things. That's why we share about these things, right? Because little by little, we're becoming a more and more and more self-controlled and loving group of people. You know, think back, hope. It's funny because we forget these things as we go. But see how our relationships have grown and deepened over the years. As I see her looking at each one of us, we've all got stories between us and connections between us and trust between us. And we're all moving in that direction, right? We're all beginning to feel these things and deepen in them. And so in time, a new time begins. All right, let's stop there for the day.